Well, here we go. Welcome to the Profit Tool Belt podcast. This is just for contractors who want to work smarter, not just harder. And look, if you're interested in the business of the contracting business, then you're in the right place. I'm here to give you straightforward, no BS answers. I've got a great guest today who's going to do that as well. There's something, his name is Greg DeSimone. One of the things that Greg is really good at is one of the things I work hard at doing is keeping things simple. And I think you're going to see that today. We're going to talk about simple systems. And specifically, we're going to be talking about if you have a family business, how do I pass this on to my kids? Now, the reason this came up as a topic is because I referred a family business, quite a large family business, to Greg, and he's now working with them and helping them put together a transition plan from the father, in this case, to the son. There's some other wrinkles in there. We're going to talk about those wrinkles today. But if you're a business owner who's thinking or curious or wondering about how to pass this business on to your kids one day, it's going to help you out. If you're, on the other hand, saying, well, I think actually my staff is going to buy it, we might be doing an ESOP, or I'll sell it to my foreman or my GM, this episode's going to help you out. If you are the kind of person who says, I'm going to wait for a phone call to come in because I think I know who's going to buy us, this episode's going to help you out, because Greg and I are going to talk about how to do a deal, how to get the business set up properly so that everybody is happy. And I'm sure, of course, that we'll talk about some cautionary tales as well. Greg is just absolutely excellent. He and I have been working together for not many years, but decades, a long time, and I trust him. His name is Greg DeSimone. His last name is, because you should look him up on LinkedIn. His last name is D-E and then S-I-M-O-N-E. And you can find him here in the show notes as well, and he'll mention this later. So today, again, family business. How do I pass this on to my kids? So why is this episode important? Look, I don't think I even have to explain it. If you have any inkling in your mind that someday you want to sell the business to somebody else, then you're going to want to hear the inside tips and stories that Greg and I are going to discuss so that you can put those to use for yourself. At any point during the podcast, or any point really, you can just always reach out and send us a text here. My cell phone number is 315-903-7853, and just say, Dom, let's talk. And then you know what we'll do? We'll talk. But listen, the very first thing, and you'll hear Greg and I talking about this, is this podcast is all about mindset, the mindset of growth for you as a business owner, and how you can open up your mind and learn new things and hang out with other people. Like today, you're going to be hanging out with myself, a professional business coach and entrepreneur. I've built and sold a couple of my own companies. You're going to be hanging out with Greg DeSimone, who shows companies how to sell. He's also, his background is also in business coaching from a long time ago. And so we see these situations and these case studies all the time. So if you ever have questions about those things, you want to talk to us, obviously that's the output of this particular episode, but just reach out. The mindset of all of those things is what falls in the background. It's being around people like Greg and myself and starting to think the way we think, use the stories, analogies, and case studies to help you formulate your thoughts for how you're going to go next. So those thoughts are really important. Now, mindset's important. And so I want to keep you open to mindset. And I just said mindset. You know what that means? Time for some dad jokes. Now, why dad jokes? And why bad jokes? And why dad jokes poorly delivered with poor timing? That's all I got. Some days you just got to rely on your wits, not your looks. Anyways, I want to get you laughing, and I want to get you open to hearing what Greg has to say. So there's a village. The guy's hiking, right? And he comes across a village in a remote jungle somewhere. There's a sign hung over a headhunter's market stall, right? And the sign says, ordinary brains, $10 a pound. Underneath that, it says engineer brains, $8 a pound. Underneath that, it says doctor brains, $7 a pound. But underneath that, it says accountant brains, $15 a pound. And then under that, it says consultant brains, $114 a pound. Now, this sounds ridiculous. So the hiker asks the owner of the shop, why do the consultant brains cost so much? The headhunter says, you don't appreciate how many consultants we have to catch to get a pound of brains. That, of course, is a joke that you can use against Greg and I if you refer to us as consultants. We're actually more coaches. We stand beside you and work our way through the issues, the challenges, the opportunity in your business, as opposed to standing on the sidelines, just lobbing your own ideas back to you. But that's a good consultant joke. Here's a joke about 50-50 partnership. And it goes directly back to the father and son conversation that Greg and I are about to have when we talk about how family businesses move. So a very successful businessman, maybe you, sits down with his new son-in-law to talk about the family business. The businessman says, look, I love my daughter. And to show you how much I care, I'm going to make you a 50-50 partner in the business. All you have to do is come to the factory every day. The son-in-law looks at him and says, well, I hate factories. The father-in-law is just a little bit irritated. He says, okay, then work in the office and manage operations. The kid says, well, I hate office work too. Well, frustrated, the father-in-law asks, well, what am I supposed to do with you? Easy, says the son-in-law. Buy me out. That one is too painful and too close to home. Here's another father-son story that I think you might find cute. A son asks his dad about the family business. The dad says, well, son, I'm a magician. And actually, my favorite trick is sawing people in half. And the son said, wow, that's so cool. Hey, listen, do I have any brothers and sisters? And the father says, yeah, you actually have 2 half brothers. So there's a dad and a mom, and they take their son to Disney. It's taken years for them to plan this and to scrape the money together. They're super excited. But of course, the kid is the kid. The son is the son. He's kind of young. So he gets tired. The dad says, well, come on, I'll put you on my shoulders. Well, they're not walking along for very long before the son starts pulling the dad's hair. And the dad says, son, if you keep pulling my hair, you're going to have to get off my shoulders and walk on your own. And the son says, sorry, Dad, and I'm just trying to get my gum back. All right, here's a doozy for you. A little bit longer, but definitely worth the wait. So one day, Mrs. Jones goes to have a talk with the minister at church. She said, Reverend, I have a problem. My husband keeps falling asleep during your sermons. It's super embarrassing. What should I do? I have an idea, said the minister. Take this hat pin with you, and I'll be able to tell from the pulpit when Mr. Jones is sleeping. And I'll nod at you at specific times. And when I nod, you give him a good poke in the leg. Sounds like a great plan, right? So they're in church the following Sunday. Mr. Jones dozes off. The preacher notices this, so he puts his plan into place. He asks, who made the ultimate sacrifice for you? He asked that question at the same time nodding and giving a signal to Mrs. Jones. So she stuck him with a pin. Mr. Jones yells out, Jesus! You are right, my son, said the minister. Well, pretty soon, Mr. Jones nods off again. The minister noticed this, and he says at the very same time, who is your redeemer? He motions towards Mrs. Jones. Well, she saw the signal, and she gave her husband a poke with a hat pin again. Mr. Jones replied with a loud, yeah. Right again, said the minister, smiling at Mrs. Jones. The plan is working. Towards the end of the sermon, Mr. Jones starts to fall asleep again. Well, this time the minister didn't notice as he's picking up the tempo of his sermon. So he starts to make more and more frantic motions to Mrs. Jones. She's not noticing. Well, when she finally catches on, she took it as a signal to really bayonet her husband with a hat pin again. Now, this happens just as the preacher asks this question. And what did Eve say to Adam after she bore him his 99th son? Mrs. Jones leans back and she just jabs him with the hat pin. Mr. Jones replies out loud, you stick that thing in me one more time, I'm gonna break it off. Okay, that's about as close as we get to the spicy side of life on this show, as you guys know. Listen, stay to the end of the show for a specific training segment where we simplify and solve a common business problem. I got a very interesting series of text messages back and forth with a roofer. We're going to call him Rick the roofer, and I'll walk you through what happened there, hopefully so that you can take that case study and apply it to your own situation and see if it helps you with your operations. Anyways, let's get to it. We'll see you on the other side. Mr. Greg DeSimone, how are you?
Doing great, Dom. How are you?
I'm good. Always good to be talking to you. Feels like most of the times our calls aren't recorded. So today we have to be on our best behavior.
Yeah, I'll have to watch it because I don't think our off-camera musings are always appropriate for air.
No, that's okay. You've been on the show before, always talking about exit strategies, family business, the real high-level stuff that people really can't find in other places. And I'm very fortunate to know you. I trust you. I rely on you. I hire you
Hmm.
for my own companies. So I think that's a endorsement there.
Yes.
But some other people might not know you, Greg.
I don't know how that's possible, but I'll let you know who I am. So
Well, hold on. Let me ask the question here, because
sure,
there's a
go
certain
ahead.
question. Everybody expects this, Greg. Everybody expects this part. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
It might even sound rude and slightly impolite, which is why I'm so excited to deliver the question.
Go ahead.
Hey, Greg DeSimone, who the heck are you? And how is it that you come to be speaking to all these forward-facing contractors all over the world?
Well, who I am, I launched my own M&A firm after working for a different M&A firm for about 8 years. M&A is mergers and acquisitions, so I help
Thank you.
people sell companies. But another niche that I have that other folks in the M&A world do not have is that I have a process called Catapult Connect. Catapult Advisor Group is the name of my company.
Mm.
Catapult Connect is a made up name, but really it's focused on a very small niche of the market. And it's where the buyer and seller already know each other. And there's three situations where that happens: family transitions,
Yep.
management buyouts, and someone's knocking on your door, or you actually know who you want to sell to because you've been talking about it for years and now you're ready, but you don't know how to go through the process. So those are the three things. That's about
Yeah.
half of my business. Those are the three things that I kind of focus on that other M&A advisors, mergers and acquisition advisors probably don't focus on.
And listen, we're obviously, you and I aren't going to share names,
Correct.
but that's why you and I talk so often, because I run across people who are selling to family, or their foreman or GM wants to buy it, or they already know the buyer.
Correct.
And that, so obviously you and I have, not obviously, I guess, because people can't hear what we're talking about, but you and I talk quite often,
Right.
where we're making intros back and forth to each other. But I just thought it was time to have you on the show again to talk about something that you and I came across in a recent transaction that's pending, or it's growing right now.
In
It's an
process.
internal, it's in process, yeah. But let's put the title of today's episode on the table. Family business? Question mark. How do I pass this to my kids? And just a slight little twist on top of that, the
Okay.
kid we're talking about is not actually a kid, he's a grown man, but he doesn't have the money to buy the business. And so you're doing some interesting magic, like the stuff you do with accounting and finance and mergers and acquisitions is kind of like a guy who knows how to take the transmission out of his car, take it apart, put it back together, and it works.
Yeah. Although I think it's a good analogy, but it's a little bit off in that you have to put back the engine in the same way all the time, or all the parts won't work.
Yeah.
When we go through this process, I do have to take the parts back together, but I don't have to put them back in the same way. Um, the goal is, and this is where I start, is I look at each generation and I said, Dad, I'm going to use dad and son, but it could be mother, daughter, it could be parents and multiple siblings. But for simplicity, dad, son for this.
Sure.
Dad, what do you want? What do you want out of this business? What do you need to have this be a successful transition? Is there money involved? Does it have to be seamless and that you can go away and never worry about it again? Define what that means. When do you want to give up control? Can you give up control? So I need the dad, the first generation to come up with what they want. And I have to do the same thing with the second generation, the son. Say, what do you need? What do you want? How does this successful? If dad needs a transaction because he needs to take money out of the business because he's been using the business as an intangible and not intangible, an illiquid asset,
as a bank account.
And he sets his bank account, he rolls the money through and he takes out what he needs, but he never really has pulled the money out. And he needs a transaction. This is where I typically get involved. I get involved with some regular succession, but it's how do we affect a transaction so dad can be financially secure, son can take over the business, but the son isn't burdened with an unfair purchase price and unfair burden to pay off dad. Yeah. And dad doesn't, dad understands what he needs to do to make sure they're successful. The other part too is make sure on the same page of the timing and who wants to do what and when, because there's been other situations where the dad says, yeah, Sonny's taking it over. Junior's taking it over. When I die. Well, does Junior know that? Is that on Junior's plan? What if Junior gets a better offer before you die and at a different place?
Yeah.
What happens to your plan then? So you got to make sure that you understand where everyone's come from and what they need. Once you know that, then you take the parts out and you put it back together and you try to match it so that it meets both people's needs. So that's why I like doing this type of work, because it's not the same every single time.
Yeah.
You have to be creative and adaptive to make sure it works for both sides.
So there's a wrinkle that I've watched you navigate many times in our back and forth. And I saw you do it on this last transaction. And so right now we're talking about father to son as an example, but I want people to understand this could happen from owner to foreman or owner to general manager,
Yes,
or it could happen if you're selling to your to somebody else that you know.
correct.
But the wrinkle that I always watch you navigate, and I've now come to learn from you to remember to ask, is you've got father and son, but it turns out there's a daughter and another son
Yeah.
that is not part of the business, has no desire to be part of the business. But when dad passes away, and again, we say this with all respect to everybody here, we're not buzzards circling, right? But at some point, we're all going to go. But when dad does pass away, what about the sister? What about the other brother? What about the mom who's still there? What about the other people who are still around? Because it's not insulated. How do you deal with that, Greg?
It's you got to dig deep and figure out what their intentions are. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because as I finished, I'm like, oh, I forgot to add this point. It's not just the people in the business. There's other family members, and sometimes it could be like multiple cousins, because it's brothers and sisters that
Oh,
owned
yeah.
it 2 to 3 generations before, and then some stayed in, some came out, but then the one that went out, their kids came back in,
Yeah.
and it's a cluster F. That's a technical M&A term. But everybody who's in the business thinks they are getting the short end of the stick, because everyone that's outside the business is getting a benefit from this business, but they're not putting any effort into it.
Right.
Then everybody outside the business says everybody in the business is getting this great benefit because they get to work there and get this paycheck. And all I'm getting is this dividend, or I'm going to get part of it when dad passes away. And that's the key you have to look at. And this is a big issue, because a lot of closely held family businesses, the biggest asset they own is the business.
Right.
But one person's working in the business and you're going to give it to that one person, but you have 2 siblings that are outside the business that either there was no room for them to come in sometimes, or they have no interest of coming in.
No interest. Yeah. Or they've
But
moved away geographically. They went to college somewhere else and they live
right,
there now. And yeah.
right. Yeah. They get married to someone at college and they don't come back. So their families living somewhere else. Like, there's all kinds of reasons why family members aren't in there. Um, but if your estate is worth, your house is worth, say, $1 million, and your business is worth $5 million, and you have $500,000 in your retirement plan, that's $6.5 million. But the business is 5 million. The person in the business, should they get a $5 million windfall? Did they earn all of that when they only took the business over, say, a year or two ago?
Right.
But dad built it up for 40 years.
From
So
zero to a million,
yes,
which is hard. We talk about that on the show all the time. It's hard to get to that first million.
it's hard to get the first million, and then it's harder to go from 1 million to 5. And there's all these different plateaus, and each one gets progressively harder unless you're willing to change, because what it takes to get to $1 million. This is why people hire you, Dom. Exactly.
That's why you refer people back to me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go to $1 million is one thing, but to how you got to $1 million isn't the same set of skills and same procedures and processes and people that you need to go to 5 million.
Yeah.
And when you go from 1 million to 5 million, you can't rely on all family members. You have to hire people that aren't related to you, and that's a different skill set. And as you get bigger and bigger, less and less people are related to you. So it gets harder and harder to trust people. And that's a big issue that people deal with. So all those things come into play. Again, that's why it's interesting, because everyone has different perspectives on how you want to treat people inside the business and outside, how many non-family members are key employees versus not. It's a lot of different moving parts to this.
Yeah. How many times do people come to you and say, this is going to be a simple transaction, Greg?
All the time. It's just for me to just meet. It's me to Sonny, me to Junior.
Yeah. But there's complexities that we have to take into account,
Right.
because, one of the things, and this is where I know you and I are very similar, and we've been working together for years and years, is that that the belief or that understanding from our side that the family name is going to continue longer than the business will.
Correct.
And it sounds harsh to say that, but I'm looking forward 150 years. Your last name is DeSimone. The DeSimone name is going to go on longer than, no offense, Catapult will, and longer than Contractor Wealth Systems on my side. That's just how things are. And the reason I say that is maybe somebody else will buy this company from me one day, or maybe I die and I haven't done a good job and it just shuts down. But the Rubino name, that's going to continue on and on. And it's important that families stay whole. It's at least to both you and I. And so we have to do our part and ask the tough questions now to make sure that happens later.
Yeah, and that's a touchy, because it can get personal. But at the end of the day, and you're from an Italian family, I'm from an Italian family. You can push back and you can argue and debate and have heated discussions, but at the end of the day, you're still family.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to go through. You have to be open to having a hard and difficult conversations.
Respectfully,
understand there's going to be differences, and one generation has their perspective, the next generation has a different perspective. Needs are different, where your starting points are different, where your end points could be different, and then figuring how to bridge those gaps and do it in a respectful manner. And that there's not one right way to do it. And actually, this is, I think, small business owners in general sometimes struggle with if they've only been in one business. Like, you've seen tons of business, there's generally a structure and a process that works, but there's nuances to it. There's different ways to approach different problems.
Right.
And I'll give you an example like that I give to business owners all the time. I was working with a septic pumping company, and they used to complain they could not get grow their business. And they said the other thing is people just don't pump their septic tanks as much as they should. And I said, well, you know what? We can borrow from another business model that works really well from people who traditionally aren't great business people. Like, dentists generally are not great business people. Right. But there's one thing they do better than any other business. You don't leave the office until you have your next appointment.
That's right. You pre-book the next.
So there's no reason, like and I asked the guy, I said, how often should you be rebooking? How often should you have your septic tank pumped? And he goes, depending on the size and volume, it should anywhere from a year to 3 years. And I said, how often are people rebooking with you? And he says, every 5. So I said, if you schedule everyone for every other year, you could basically double your business
right off
without getting any new customers. You just make sure the next appointment's scheduled before your guy leaves.
Yeah. That's a simple system, but completely turns around the business. Barbers can do that. Like any business could do that. Just pre-book the next.
And you and I see this, and that's where I sometimes see the first generation sometimes struggles, because particularly if they founded the business, they're pretty successful. So they think what I did is the only way to do it. And even if the market's changing, the dynamics are changing, the generational behaviors are changing and perspectives are changing, they can't see there might be other ways that can work.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of time with this conflict is the next generation wants to change everything. The first generation says, why are you changing anything? This works.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the cultural stuff you have to deal with.
Yeah, that is a difficulty. And one of the things that I see on the other side of the transaction, when let's keep using the father and son analogy, just to keep it simple.
Right.
That son is his own person. He's struggling he wants to be a leader. He wants to establish himself in the business. He wants to establish his mark and the changes that he wants. Thank God, he wants to grow. But there's a little bit of, well, I don't do it Dad's way. So Dad's way is the only way, I've been told, for 10, 15, maybe 20 years. Every leader is going to be different. There is no one magic formula. There's no one behavioral style. There's no one leadership style. But you do have to sit back and understand, if you put if you try to introduce too much change at once, it's going to cause too much hardship on the company. So there's a slow transition to something else. But your type of leadership, your style, your vision can come true. Absolutely. You just have to do it in a respectful, long-term way, not immediate.
Correct.
Yeah. So how do you get started? Go back to the question. If you have a family business, how do I pass this to my kids? First of all, don't you have to have something that's worth passing to the kids?
Yes. I start with, is your business transferable? You want to create, and I think we've talked about this maybe in another.
Yeah, we have. Is your business even viable? I think
Yeah,
that was
is
the
it
name of the
viable or
episode.
I've changed it to transferable
Mm,
because you may not want to have a third party buy it. You want to maybe hand it off to the next generation. But the business has to be transferable. Like if you set this business up where it relies on you, dad, and it's dependent on you, like all the customers call because they know you. If
mm,
all the suppliers call that you buy from only give you deals because it's you, um, if the employees only respond to orders because it's you, and then you leave, what happens to the business?
yeah,
Your
it's
business
bad.
isn't transferable.
Yeah.
If it can't run without you, because that's why I think I mentioned I think you introduced me to a gentleman named David Sullivan. I was on his podcast.
Mm,
It's like saying like you want to be able to take that 2 week vacation. I like the business I love talking to is when the parents are down in Florida and the businesses up in New England running all winter and they just check in. I'm like, well, I know that business is transferable because dad's playing golfing on the beach all winter and he
right.
comes back for the summer. That's those are the types of business is can your business be transferred? Is it transferable? That's the starting point. Because if your business isn't set up to be transferred,
Yeah.
you're handing a mess off to your kids. And if your kids can't take it over, then you're stuck with a business that's not transferable, which means you can't sell it. And I'm a big fan of even though you want to give it to your kids, keep your options open because things happen. Sometimes you like I've seen family members where the kids were online to take over, but they get a sweetheart offer and they get a job where they're getting twice the pay, which is unusual when you go from a family business to outside because sometimes you're overpaid. But they get a great offer. They have to relocate, and the succession plan's now blown
Hey,
up, and your business is not ready to be transferred because you just thought Junior would take it over.
yeah. A good friend of mine took over his dad's home building business. And he's doing a great job running this home building business. But you know what? He doesn't actually want to be a home builder. He's Asian and he's got a very strong family culture as well. And he felt it was his duty because his mom gets paid from the building company. And so
Mm-hmm.
his duty was to keep that company running to take care of mom, right? That is like the highest level of personal values you can have. But
Mm-hmm.
he wants to write computer programs. He's like an excellent software engineer, but he is, in his own words, stuck as a home builder because he doesn't, it's not what he wants to do. And I wonder how many people out there right now, let's say I'm the father and I want to pass it to my son, but I forgot to ask my son, hey, is this what you want to do?
Right.
Is this where you want to live? I can think of a situation where a father had moved from his family because he was in the military, military moves around, and then he had a son and now they're in another place, but they don't really feel like they're from that place. They feel like they're from the first place. I'm not using any location names, even though they've been living there for a generation and a half.
Mm-hmm.
They still, their favorite football teams from the other state, their favorite city is what they always
Yeah.
talk about, but they live somewhere else. And so
Right.
those kinds of nuances or little wrinkles, actually, they're a big deal.
Yeah, it is big, and it all comes into how to set that plan up and how to make your business, like I said, transferable. Like, and it starts with communication, and I've seen this too, and particularly with Italian and Irish families. I'm both of those, so I'll talk about it. And I'm sure there's other ethnic backgrounds where it's patriarchal, and you take orders, and until it's your time to be the patriarch. Um, but if you they typically wait and just assume that you assume that you have the plan in your head and everyone knows that the plan is going to take place. No one
Oh,
knows what that plan is. They just assume it's going to be taken care of. You assume they think it's going to be taken care of, and no one knows what's going on.
yeah. I mean, you and I both
I didn't
understand
say that
the
very well. It's
traction.
like it's in
No,
your
no,
head. No one knows it.
and you didn't say it badly because I hear this back from people when I'm talking to business owners. They're like, Dom, I got to get everything out of my head and on paper. It's all in my head. And it's those are the people who've gotten to that point in the business when they've, the physical move that I think has happened is they're working, 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 and they stand up to finally stretch their back and look around and they're like, you know what? I got to get this out of my head and on paper. And that's why we use, I don't know if you can see the book behind me, Traction,
Yep.
which is written by Gino Wickman. It's the
I heard
EOS system. I know you have it because you and I know each other ultimately through business coaching for years now. But if a company without a plan, a strategic plan, is just a project. You're just jumping from job to job, hoping that you make projects, you make money on every project, but you don't really know. Until you've got a written plan that everybody agrees to, which is blueprints, by the way. It's the basis of our industry, blueprints, schematics. Why would it be any different for your business? But you got to have that.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. So we talked about one of the deals, I suppose, or the situations that I brought you. Tell me about some other ones that you've been working on that are family transition plans that you've learned some interesting things about. How about that cabinet shop that you bought a couple of years ago? People don't know this, but
that wasn't a family transition. That one, this is, that was when I as part of the transaction, it wasn't originally the plan that I would become owner of the company, but I liked the company a lot. I liked the person selling it a lot, and I liked the person buying it a lot. And when I was asked if I would want to roll some of my fee into the company to help fund some working capital and to get them rolling, I said, sure. And I negotiated a small percentage. It's like 5% or something like that. And it's interesting. I like both people, but they ended up not liking each other, and they didn't document enough of they thought they had an understanding of how things were going to work after the close and how things would transition and how introductions would be made and how training would be passed over. And they had conversations. The recollection was different after the fact. And it reminded me, it was an Italian guy. He came over, I don't know, maybe 40 years ago, but he's first generation. And typically the kid was acting like a petulant kid. Like, I've run business before. I've been other places. This is the same business, but it was different. And the previous owner says, I will help you, but you got to do this, this, and this. And the guy says, I own the business. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And he's like, well, I'm not going to help you if you're not going to do this, this, and this. And all of a sudden they just kept going back and forth until the end where they just couldn't work with each other. And unfortunately, it hurt both of them because they didn't document what they wanted. They didn't have a plan of how they're going to do it, which happens more often with families because there's less documentation when it's going from one family to another versus these are two third parties, and they liked each other. They were shaking hands. They thought this is great. This is a perfect fit. And as soon as the checks were written,
the attitudes changed.
And the understanding of what was said during the process, during the negotiations, was misremembered. I'm going to say both of them misremembered. And since I was a minority shareholder, I couldn't do much about it. I was stuck as a referee many times, but I couldn't, with my 5%, could not make anyone's behavior change.
Yeah. Well, you can't. I mean, I think at the point in time, I've learned this just because now I have gray hair and wrinkles. But anytime you're pulling out the contract to make your point, the relationship is that's the bottom level of your relationship.
Yes.
And ego gets in the way.
That's what it was. It was ego. And I think it happens more often than not in family transactions, is that dad's ego is, I built this. Why can't you just continue it? Kid's ego is like, Dad, I work somewhere else. I know how to do this. I've done this. I've seen other ways.
Yeah.
But that's not our way. And there starts to be a ramming of the heads, and you got to have that resolved. You have to have that resolved in any kind of transaction, but it's really important so that when you have Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner, birthday parties, that the
family is
have
still
the family
whole.
events and not worry about fighting about the business.
Yeah, in front of the grandkids and the great grandkids.
Correct.
You mentioned ego, and I think that's a really good observation. The other way that I look at that is self-identity. We're going to use the dad and son again. The dad identifies as the owner of, let's say, a kitchen and bath renovation company. I'll just use that because it covers so many trades. So you're a home renovations company, and that's how the dad identifies himself. I'm a home reno guy. He doesn't have any hobbies. He doesn't give himself the time to golf, surf, fish, hunt, travel with his wife, scuba dive, whatever the other thing is, all he does is work. And because he doesn't have a working business with systems in place and delegation in place and other people, being in charge of stuff, he is the business. And so the hero syndrome takes over.
Mm-hmm.
The hero syndrome is great because somebody comes to ask me a question and I know the answer. I am the master of my domain. I know everything about everything in this company. And the ego, to your point, has not allowed that owner to separate themselves. And so their identity is wrapped up in the business, which makes it impossible for them to step away.
Correct.
And the first thing I try to do, and Greg, both came from the coaching background. I don't know how your approach was, but we got to get that owner a hobby. We got to get them thinking about doing other things. We got to get them leaving for the weekend. We got to get them delegating little things. We have to get them some key people in place so they trust, like an administrator. It sounds so simple.
Yeah.
But having an admin who could just gather numbers and take care of the stuff.
Right. Yeah, I think it starts with, like, when they talk to the in the business, like, I know you use your term, that the hero, but the hero doesn't have to do everything in the business. Like, Superman doesn't sweep all the floors of all the shop owners that he's protecting. He does the saving. So let's assume you really are the hero. You are Superman. You don't still have to do everything. Like, what are the things that you don't like to do, but you just do because you want to? Like, start with those things. Like, just like, I'm annoyed, I hate doing this. Start getting rid of that stuff so you can start to find free time. And quite honestly, this is important for all aspects of life. We're going a little off topic. Like, I love to play golf, but you're going to spend a lot of time away from the house if you play golf.
Yeah.
So if I want to spend a lot of time away from the house playing golf, I have to make sure my wife has something that she likes to do for 4 or 5 hours as well. So she's not sitting there fuming that she wants to do something waiting for me. Now, great, my wife is not a wallflower and doesn't need me for all this stuff, but it makes it much easier when she can go do her thing
when
and
she's
I
busy
can do my
too.
thing. Right.
Yeah.
So it's the same. It works all the place. If you want to have your freedom, you got to make sure that you have a hobby. You got to make sure that other people around you have their things, so that you're not solely relying on each other. So you got to make yourself so the business is not solely relying on you, and you're not solely relying on the business. That they both should be able to coexist together and separately.
Wise words, Greg DeSimone. Wise words.
I try. You screw it up enough, you figure it out.
We're not supposed to tell people that. We've been screwing it up for, at this point, 20, 22 years. In the last 2 years, we finally found our groove, right?
Oh, last year, maybe.
Maybe halfway through last year.
Yeah.
Greg, I'm not shy to ask you back. I love having you as a guest because the wisdom and the story is just incredible. And your approach is, you're not dry. A lot of valuations and mergers and acquisition guys are very dry. And I find your style, you're easy to talk to because you just use normal language. I work hard at using normal language. I have a joke that, why use a diminutive word when a short one will do? Like, we don't have to overcomplicate things.
Correct.
Right.
Well, I agree with you. And I take pride in that. And I've actually, you and I used to work together in different projects. And I remember dealing with people that were successful and that weren't successful. And I took it upon myself to figure out why people weren't successful when they had seemingly the same skill set. And the people that I talked to when I dug into it that were not successful is they were trying to sound smart. They were trying to say things in a complicated way to show that, hey, look how much I know because I'm saying this simple thing in a very complex way. Versus the reverse is, I'm taking a complex issue and I'm going to break it down to 5 or 6 easy steps that each one is very understandable. And if you do these steps, you'll be successful. The process overall might be a little bit complicated, but each step that we do is pretty simple. So we're going to focus on the simple pieces.
Yeah. You call them simple pieces. I call them simple systems here. And myself and all my coaches, we just work on simple systems. It doesn't have to be complicated. I look at how many contractors within one generation have become multimillionaires, and every city's got this. You've got that guy, that company, and they started out doing framing, residential framing. And then they started to do 3-story walk-ups. And now they're doing concrete towers, 60 stories at a time. It's easy to look at them today as a snapshot in time, but you forget until you walk in their office and see the picture on the wall of the owner with a shovel and his old station wagon and a black and white photo. And you're like, that guy started there.
Mm-hmm.
He started with a shovel.
Right.
Right. And you just ripped guns. He's got that awkward singlet on the I'm going to call it a tank top.
Yeah.
Right. He's wearing jeans. He's in a hole. He's digging a sewer ditch by himself. And you're like, this guy now builds towers. It's within a generation. They've completely changed the trajectory of their last name. The kids now, I'll say the kids, could be, again, former GM, anything, are coming into this and they think that's normal. They forget that there's been a lot of evolution there. So a couple of messages in there. Keep it simple. Keep your head down. Follow a system. Make the system work, and then have pride in what you do.
Yeah. As much as you have the parents with the ego, you also remember the kids too. Sometimes they I call it the lucky sperm club, but they're standing on third base and they were born on third base.
They're born on third. Yeah.
And they think they hit a triple. I'm like, no, you didn't hit the triple. You started at third. Your dad or mom started at home plate and worked their way to third base. Now you're at third base. So there's a lot of that. So you have to work in the other way too. So some people, some of the kids, take it for granted. Like I think that there's got to be give and take on both sides. But a lot of the kids have an ego where they forgot the head start they're getting, and appreciate it, and not try to blow it up, but take it and enhance it and improve it, not change it.
Yeah, I worry about that with my kids because they have a good life, and I had to hustle. I don't see them hustling as much. And, I look at my son, I'm like, there's a lawnmower in the garage. Why don't you get out there and like jog up and down the neighborhood, knocking on doors like I used to. My first business was Christmas lights.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. I have no idea why. What possessed me to want to do Christmas lights? But I did it, and I sucked at it, and I failed. And I look at my son's great. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, where's the hustle? Where's you saying I got to go do this thing? And I wonder how many of us look back at our own kids and say, how come they don't have the hustle or the chops that I did? But again, that's the hero in me taking over, not saying they're going to have their own way to get where they need to go.
Right.
I want you to be born on third and end up owning the team.
Right.
And building the next stadium and da-da-da. But that's what you and I help people do. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Greg, just so we don't run out of things to talk about, why don't we wrap it here? Because you and I could end up running out of things to talk about.
Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe.
I doubt it.
It'd be a different topic.
Hey, actually, you just started your own podcast, didn't you?
I did start my own podcast. It's the DeSimone on Deals, the Exit Strategy podcast. We just launched our first episode, and we have one already in the bank ready to go, and we have 2 more episodes being scheduled to be recorded soon. So they're going to be doled out piecemeal, but the focus is on not necessarily how to maximize, not just the sale part of the business, but how to prepare your business for sale. What are the common pitfalls that happen? I'm going to bring in lots of different experts who've helped people prepare for sale. I'm going to bring in attorneys, CPAs that give their insight to their particular piece of that process. So there's going to be some horror stories and some success stories, like what to do and what to copy and what not to do. So it should be fun and interesting. And the goal is, I'm talking to a lot of like construction folks. So these people are more professional. I think they're entertaining and I think they're interesting. That's the goal. But I guess it's in the eye of the beholder. They're very entertaining CPAs and attorneys. Sometimes they're going to be former business owners as well. So you'll hear from people that actually sold the business and what they would do again and what they would do differently if they went through it. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I've got lots of referrals for you on that because I've had lots of interesting guests here. It's hard to put together a lineup of valuable guests because you have to find people who want to serve others before they serve themselves. That's what I look for. Ultimately, I want a guest who's here to inform, educate, and inspire.
Well, the one thing my whole motto when I launched my company is it's funny, I have to sell and you have to market to get business, but really what my phrase is I market through education. And that's why I do the podcast. That's why I like to be on your podcast. And I've been on other podcasts, is that if I can educate the market and the people on how to get better outcomes through this process, I'd be happy.
Perfect.
And hopefully
So
you use me to do it, but if not, who cares?
it's okay. It's okay if they don't. I tell people on the show all the time, you don't
Mhm.
have to, you don't have to work with me, but you still have to do what we're talking about.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe you don't like the messenger. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But
Yeah.
you're going to go have to find somebody to walk you through this unless you want to try to climb Mount Everest alone.
Right.
Right? That would be foolish. There's bodies frozen up there already of
Yes.
people that didn't listen to their guides, or, like, why
Right.
would you do that? So that people know how to find your show, can you spell your last name? Because it sounds a little bit different than it's spelled.
Sure. Greg DeSimone. DeSimone. But probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is go to my website, catapultadvisorygroup.com, and there's a contact me, and it'll come, your comments and your notes will come right to me.
Yeah. Perfect. So, folks, if you do want to reach out to Greg, I as you've heard already, Greg and I have been referring deals back and forth for years. So if you can't reach Greg, you can always contact me and I'll put you in touch with him. And if you want to reach me in some awkward way, you could contact Greg and have him introduce us, but that would be like the longest way to get to me, but that's okay. Greg,
Why
thanks
make
for
it
being
easy?
on. What's that?
Why make it easy when you can do it hard?
Why make it easy? I always say to people, look, if you can't find me online, you ain't looking. It's embarrassing how many places. Just try to spell my name, kind of get it right. You're going to know right away. There's another kid with my name. He's out in your neck of the woods, and he's like a high school wrestler or a college wrestler. Yeah, that's not me. You can tell by the hair color. That's not me. All right, but great to have you on the show. I appreciate your wisdom and insight. And as you know, you'll be back again.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Greg. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well. What did you learn from Mr. Greg DeSimone? If you're a family business, if you're the leader of a family business and you want to sell it, hopefully you got a lot of value. If you want to sell this business to your staff or your employees or somebody that you already know, then hopefully you got a lot of insights there. We're going to simplify and solve a common problem today. It's just a series of text messages. This is a really common and normal way that people reach out. I always say, send me a text message. So people just text me, right? And usually a code word. And I think this code word works well for what Greg and I were talking about, which is the blind spots tool. It's 20 questions to help you unpack and pull apart just a really realistic summary of where your business is at. Like, in order to get to your goal, you have to know where you're starting from. And so this is just 20 very simple questions that you can answer for yourself about yourself, right? So I get this SMS from a guy named, I'm going to call him Rick. And now he's a roofing company owner. We can call him Rick. So he just says blind spots tool. And so my text message back is, yeah, absolutely happy to share it. Tell me, what's the main area you're looking to improve? Sales, operations, or something else? And so Rick sends me back a message, definitely operations. He says ops. We're doing okay with sales, but the job sites could run smoother. Now, how often does that happen? You as the expert, you grew up through the business, you started the business, you probably know how to run jobs. Rick, we have had conversations now. So Rick started as a roofer working for somebody else, went out on his own. So he knows the technical part of roofing. Nothing scares him in roofing, but he's saying, look, we're doing okay with sales, but the job sites could run smoother. And he knows that because he's run job sites himself. And so he's frustrated. He's just kind of not really at wit's end, but he's like, look, I got to try to apply some new solutions to this old dusty problem. And that's where he's at that point. So anyways, I sent over the blind spots assessment. Turns out he's in Ontario, by the way, Ontario, Canada. And then I said, look, once you've done the assessment, reach out. If you have any questions, we'll go through the tool. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to get this blind spots professional development tool. It's how many pages? It's 3 pages long. It's not that long. The first page is a cover page. So there you go. It's even shorter than that. So it's 2 working pages. But I want you to print this thing out. I want you to leave the office. I want you to go for coffee. I want you to put your headphones in. I want you to face the corner at a nice coffee shop. And I just want you to work on your business, not in it. I want you to think the big thinks. And these 20 questions will help you do that. Now, nobody's going to see your answers unless you share them with me. Nobody's going to see your answers. So you can be really honest with yourself. What I want you to do after that is, after you've gone through these 20 questions and scored yourself, is just rank question number 1. And you'll know what the biggest, hairiest, ugliest thing is because of that feeling in your stomach. Everything will start to point back to this one question. That'll be the one point. That, my friend, that's the first thing you have to start fixing in your business if you want to get to the next level or the goal that you're looking at, right? All of us want to get to some next level in our business. What this tool helps you do is see over the hill, see over the hump of getting to that next level, right? It's a very specific tool. This is a business coaching tool. This is a tool that removes emotion and adds logic to the conversation. So it's a data-driven tool without you having to do a bunch of homework, talk to your accountant or talk to anybody in operations. You can just do it because you know how operations work. It's called the blind spots assessment. It's actually called Where Are My Blind Spots? A construction business reality check. Super exciting. But it is just 20 questions and you score yourself between 1 and 5. Here, let's randomly, how many tabs do I have open now? 1, 2, 3. I have 9 tabs open. So let's go look at what question 9 is. Question 9, ask yourself this if you want a sample of what's inside this particular report. Question 9, just randomly. Ask yourself this and score yourself between 1 and 5, where a 1 is you're very weak in your company and 5 is where your company is very strong. So here's question 9. Who is accountable for what? Do we have an organizational chart of roles and responsibilities that is clear, complete, constantly updated, and known by everyone? Now, in this case, when we say everyone that needs to know it. So usually your managers, your supervisors, if you have engineers, if you have draftspeople, estimators, and things like that, you might not necessarily have an org chart that everybody in the company knows, like your most junior person. However, one of the simple systems that myself and my coaching team help people put in place is a very simple poster called Who to Call for What. It's a poster or it's something that you have on your company website where your staff log in. It saves you tons of time. It removes all sorts of confusion. And on its own, it doesn't change the world, but it's one brick in the wall when you're building the system for turning your business around. All that from that one random question, randomly generated by the number of tabs I have open on my computer right now, question 9. So there's 20, well, there's 19 other questions, but there's 20 questions just like that. And again, this is self-directed work. You're going to get this download from me, this professional development tool. So you're doing work that we all want to do, which is work on the business, not in it. And you're going to be able to have a wise perspective that only you will understand. So you're the expert in the business. You're going to know how to answer these questions better than anybody else. Now, if you have a business partner, this is an excellent tool to share with your business partner. Ask them to do it separate than you. And then you guys can get together and compare notes. That's a doozy. It's a really, really good way, again, to remove the emotion and add logic because there's scores at the end. There's a percentage score. And that logic will help you move towards the right decisions. Anyways, Rick and I met. Great guy. Well, at the time of these text messages, we were just talking about meeting, but we've now met. Great guy and wants to do coaching. Right now, that isn't the outcome of every conversation we have. Not everybody's ready to do coaching. We don't even accept everybody to work with us because you have to meet certain criteria for us as well. But Rick and I are still talking about that right now. Anyways, the point of this is the value of the tool. Whether you use the information or not, whether you ever reach out to me afterwards or not, that's all up to you. We're all adults here. We all make our own decisions. But at least start with having the tool. Have the tool. Get the tool from me. It's called Where Are My Blind Spots? A construction business reality check. But what I want you to do is just send me the keyword blind spots. And that way I know which one to send back to you. It's kind of our simple system. You guys know my cell phone number. It's 315-903-7853. Just say blind spots. Shoot it off to you. And then you'll be able to have your own logical, cold, factual assessment of where your business is and what you have to go work on next to get you to the next level, what might be holding you back. Okay. Anyways, I hope you enjoy that. Thank you very much for checking in. Greg DeSimone, I hope you're listening to this episode because I just interviewed you. Thank you for joining me. I love your wisdom and I love your approach. Greg and I have worked together for many, many years, and he has never let me down when I've referred people to him. If you have any questions for me, you guys know my cell phone, reach out. But again, all of this is just a replacement for the day when you and me, one-on-one, have a coffee or a glass of wine across the table from each other. And I look forward to that more than you'll ever know. Have a great day. Thanks for checking in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.